Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Pamela Fuselli. She is the president and CEO at Parachute. Parachute is Canada's national charity dedicated to injury prevention. Pamela was the executive director at Safe Kids Canada, and during her tenure was one of the 4 leaders who successfully led a process of national consultation and visioning, resulting in the formation of Parachute, which this summer is celebrating its 10th anniversary. So our topic tonight is going to be about Parachute, about injury prevention, and about Pamela Fuselli. Pamela, how are you? Welcome to the show.
I'm very well, thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So let's talk a little bit about, to start with, about what Parachute is. So you're saying that it was the result of something at Safe Kids Canada. And what did Safe Kids Canada think needed to happen that wasn't being done such that you created Parachute?
Yeah, Safe Kids Canada, along with 3 other organizations, national organizations, leaders, we came together about 12 years ago or so and looked at the space in Canada that we were all working in slightly different but overlapping areas. And in order to forward the agenda of saving people's lives through injury prevention, we felt that there really needed to be one national organization. And so the national consultation resulted in the formation of Parachute, which is an amalgamation of those four organizations. So Safe Kids Canada, Smart Risk, Think First Canada, and Safe Communities Canada.
Oh, really? And these 4 different organizations are also national, or are they regional, or are they just dealing with specific issues and problems?
We were all national. So Think First is focused on brain and spinal cord injury. Safe Kids Canada obviously focused on young kids. Smart Risk focused on youth and young drivers. And Safe Communities was and still is a designation that communities can get that laid out priorities for injury prevention in their communities. And so we all did something slightly different, but overlapping. And so together we are stronger. So the 4 organizations shut down their operations, and we became Parachute 10 years ago, at the beginning of July.
So they all shut down their operations?
Yeah, we did, and amalgamated to form Parachute.
And has it worked out, do you think?
Definitely, it was the right thing to do.
Why?
It provides one source or one place to go for both our stakeholders that we work with, like public health and transportation and enforcement, police, fire, ambulance, those types of groups, as well as policymakers, government contacts, and the public. It's a trusted place, credible place to go for injury prevention information.
Fascinating. And it sounds like you're having a big impact. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about why, what you do, and what the impact is in just a few minutes. We're going to take a break for 2 minutes and be back with Pamela Fuselli of Parachute Canada in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Pamela Fuselli, who is the president CEO of an organization called Parachute Canada, which is an organization that really is something that's brought together 4 different organizations that were involved in injury prevention, and she's now the head of it and consolidated. And it's a national organization that I hadn't heard about before. So I wanted to reach out and find out a little bit more about it. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest, if I could. She's got some interesting background. She's got an Indigenous Canada certificate from the University of Alberta. She's got a BSc in psychology from the University of Toronto. She's got a BHA in health administration from Ryerson University. And she's got a master's in science for creativity and change leadership from the State University of New York College at Buffalo. What's creativity and change leadership?
Well, it's a way of thinking about problems, about approaches to strategic thinking, and it's processes that really bring out ideas and generation of ideas that might not be something that comes out when you are either working by yourself or you take the first, couple of ideas that come forward. It really is a framework to structure accessing those creative ideas and using them in various fields. Creativity is used in a lot of corporations, in marketing and product development, in education, and I use it a lot in the area of public health, in the area of injury prevention, to be able to look at what are some of the challenges that the field and the sector is facing, and how do we generate great ideas that will really get to the core of the solutions.
Interesting. I want to tell you a little bit about our guest's background. She started out as a coordinator for Safe Kids Canada, and she spent 5 years doing that. Then she was the director of Safe Kids Canada. Then she was a executive director of Safe Kids Canada. And so you spent 12 years and 7 months working at the Hospital for Sick Children, running different portions of Safe Kids Canada, ultimately running the whole thing. KT theme leader at CANET, the Cardiac Arrhythmia Network of Canada. That sounds interesting. An adjunct professor at the University of Western Ontario, where you were working with public health students. Then I love this. You became the VP Knowledge Transfer and Stakeholder Relations. That sounds interesting. And then the interim president CEO, and then the president CEO of Parachute, where you've been for 10 years. So really a history of starting in one job and really progressing through the ladder to run the whole gamut.
I've been working in this area for over 20 years. I can't believe how fast the time has gone. I've seen some progress, but I'm still pretty frustrated. And why Parachute, still exists is the lack of attention that preventable injuries is given. So thank you for having me on and being able to speak to this.
So why do you think an organization dedicated to preventing injuries is actually needed? Wouldn't people just want to naturally not get injured?
Well, you'd think so, but preventable injuries and deaths, and when I talk about that, that's sort of an umbrella category, but we're talking about things like motor vehicle crashes, poisonings, falls. All of these injuries together are the #1 cause of death for Canadians aged 1 to 44. So if you're in that age group, you're more likely to die from a preventable injury than any other cause. And it's the 3rd cause of death for all ages. So this surprises people. Many people think it's cancer, heart disease, other diseases that would be the leading causes of death for Canadians and people in Canada. And that isn't the case. And so our organization is looking to prevent the serious injuries and fatal injuries, not the bumps and bruises of everyday life. We are not, as you can imagine, our name is Parachute. So it is, a proven life-saving device. When you are jumping out of a plane, you need a working parachute.
But it's not bubble wrap. And so your point is trying to prevent everything.
Exactly. We want people to get out there. We want them to skydive. We want them to do whatever it is that they love to do in life, or that they need to do, like working and going to school and playing. But we want them to do certain things, and we want the environment that people operate in to have certain safety approaches so that we can prevent these fatal and serious injuries. It also is, from our organization, it's also a huge drain on the Canadian healthcare system. In 1 year, $29.4 billion with a B. So the crazy thing about it is we know how to prevent these injuries. And I know you've probably heard about, all of the hospitals right now are talking about how strained they are in emergency rooms and with people being admitted. We know how to prevent a lot of these injuries, and the dollars that we're spending on injuries that are showing up in emergency and being admitted, we could prevent those or reduce the severity of their injuries.
Okay,
So,
well, let's break this down. So what are some of
yeah.
the leading causes of injuries?
So it does vary a little bit by age, but overall, we're looking at falls, motor vehicle crashes, and poisoning being the leading causes of injury. And in fact, in the last report that we published last year in 2021, for the first time, poisonings outstripped motor vehicle crashes. Motor vehicle crashes are always one of the leading causes of death and hospitalization. I think the poisoning numbers have gone up because of the opioid crisis, but we don't have that level of detail to really be able to tease that apart. But those are the leading causes. A lot of people don't think about falls at all. I mean, everybody falls, but there are certain age groups that are more affected by falls than others. And you can think about the really young kids and our older adults.
So what are the potential solutions? Wearing a helmet all the time? No one wants to wear a helmet all the time.
No, and that's what makes it somewhat of a challenge for prevention of injuries is we really need to focus the solution on what's causing those fatal and serious injuries. So, like you say, a bike helmet. Bike helmet is great when you're riding a bike. On a playground, it's actually a strangulation hazard. So it's not a one size
Really?
fits
That's
all.
interesting.
Yeah, and it really does. It makes it very focused for us, which I think is great because you're not just doing a widespread, let's just put a helmet and a bubble wrap on everybody. What we want to do is really focus on what is effective in making those changes. And what's the most effective is addressing system level changes. So
Like
layers of protection is sort of where we look at what are the things that we can put in place that people don't have to do repeatedly. So think about changes that we achieved when, the child resistant caps on medications. The incidence of poisonings just for children just plummeted when those were widespread on products.
Really, I get pissed off every single time I have to open up one of these things and I can't figure it all out. So I guess I'm a child, but they're really worth it.
Yeah. Instead of asking, or in addition to asking parents to keep medications away from kids locked up high, the product itself is made safer. So it's child resistance. You notice I didn't say child proof because nothing is 100%. And so that's sort of the layers of protection. That cap on the medication, if the medication has been left out, or a child climbs up on, the toilet or a stool and gets into the cabinet, it buys parents some time to realize where their kids are or what they're getting into. So that's kind of the layers of protection. We want to think about things that people just sort of interact in a safe environment. So falls, for instance, solutions to falls, those are things like putting grab bars in bathtubs and showers, use of handrails on designs, and even the stair designs themselves, how wide that tread is when you are walking up and down the stairs. That makes a huge difference. The use of baby gates on stairs for the younger kids, those types of things. But I think probably the best example of a system solution is in road safety. So in that transportation injuries piece. And many of your listeners will have heard about Vision Zero, which is a safe systems approach. So it takes a system approach, not an individual behavior approach. And the idea with Vision Zero is that all of us as human beings are going to make mistakes. We shouldn't have to pay for those mistakes with our lives. And when we're focused on serious injuries and fatal injuries, we're not talking about the fender benders, right? So there are ways to design, and we've seen this very effectively put in place in countries like Sweden, where you can actually design the roadways to make it safe for all road users. So whether that you're a driver, a cyclist, a pedestrian, we're typically at least a driver or a pedestrian at some point in trips. So, like separated bike lanes, we've heard a lot about those, not just the painted lines on the road, but actual separation of bikes from drivers. No right turns on reds, because that's where we get into those points of conflict with the driver and the car and a pedestrian, a cyclist, or giving pedestrians longer times to cross the road. So the walk signal goes on before the green light goes for cars. And there's ways to design roadways that actually, as a driver wouldn't necessarily know it, but the design of the roadway actually gives you cues to drive more slowly. So those are some of the design or system level kind of interventions that we know are very effective. When we think about human beings, I mean, we're all fallible, and if we only knew what we should do and actually do them, nobody would smoke, we wouldn't have obesity, we wouldn't, those types of things. So there is a role for individuals to play, but when we can design environments and products like medication bottles, it just takes that necessity of somebody to make a behavior change out of the equation and makes it safer.
I understood one of the biggest impacts is just lowering speed, and that, if you hit someone at 60 kilometers or 100 kilometers, it has a fatal impact, but at 20 or 30, it doesn't. What are you doing in regards to speed limits?
Yeah, absolutely. Speed is a huge factor in cycling and pedestrian deaths. And so working with municipalities as a part of their road safety strategy, considering where speed limits need to be reduced, where our kids, we've seen a lot of municipalities take action in safe school zones. So making the zones around schools safer so that kids can walk to school. I mean, one of the myths is that, my kid is safer if I drive them to school and drop them off. They're way more at risk in a car than as a pedestrian. And we want to make...
Really, that's interesting. They're more at risk in a car than as a pedestrian. Why do you say that?
Well, there's more deaths from children in cars, in vehicles, than as pedestrians. So, when they're... and I don't know if you've been around a school recently, but those kiss and ride, the drop-offs, there's a couple of things going on there. There's the volume of vehicles, there's speed, there's the volume of kids that are around, but it's also active transportation, that walking or biking or even rolling on a scooter or a skateboard is physical activity. That's part of that. Not bubble wrapping kids or not bubble wrapping anyone, is we want to encourage them to be more active, because keeping your kids indoors, to keep them safe from getting hit by a car, is causing other issues of not building relationships, being inactive, mental health, all kinds of things. And so these things really work in tandem. So it's very important to be able to provide environments that will support this kind of activity for kids.
I'm surprised that you said poisoning was so high. And, when you mentioned, Oxycontin or other drugs, then I guess I understand it a bit more, because I hadn't sort of thought that drug abuse would have been included in your definition of an injury from poisoning. But what are some of the other, child resistant? I understand that. What are some of the other poisonings? Is like what is it that people are taking by accident?
So medications, over-the-counter medications, especially for kids, are high. Cleaning products, things that people don't think about are beauty products like makeup and nail polish remover, those types of things. Plants. More recently, we've seen
plants.
Yep, danger. If you've got mushrooms, berries out in your garden, those are some of the things that that kids, especially the younger kids, they explore their environment by putting things in their mouths, and they don't have as much of aversion to certain tastes as adults do. So for instance, you couldn't imagine drinking windshield washer fluid or coolant, but a child would actually ingest.
Kids do.
Have it. They do. They don't taste it. It doesn't turn them off as much. But one of the more recent things that we've seen since cannabis has become legal are an increase in poisonings from cannabis, especially edibles.
The kids are grabbing the gummies?
Well, yeah. And even as an adult, if you weren't aware if there's a cookie or a gummy bear sitting on the counter, you wouldn't necessarily know just from looking at the product, unless it was in its packaging, whether it had cannabis or not. And the kids are smaller, their metabolism is faster, so they actually get the THC, the active ingredient in cannabis, goes through their system faster, and they they're more affected by it. So we've seen some, with our colleagues at the poison centers across the country, they have seen an increase in calls from cannabis poisoning. Really?
Unbelievable. So what's the systemic change that you're going to institute there?
Well, I mean, the legalization of it, the products that come in packaging with the doses, we can count on the products, the cannabis being equally distributed throughout the product. One of the things that we are really concerned about is the illegal products. So cannabis is legal, but there are still illegal products. And the poison centers have seen packages of candy like gummy bears that have cannabis in them, but they're not a legal product. They haven't been produced through the legal market. And so, getting families and parents aware that these products are out there, and to be very aware of what they're buying. Absolutely storing their gummies and other edible products up high and locked, just like you would a medication, is really important. And there's, we're working with, with the poison centers and some of our other stakeholders to really raise awareness about this issue, and working with consumer product safety on the labeling of the products, where they're sold, how they're packaged, et cetera. So there's again, those layers of protection. There's a number of different things that we can do.
We're chatting tonight with Pamela Fuselli, who is the president and CEO of Parachute, a Canadian injury prevention organization. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back more with Pamela in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're talking about injury prevention tonight with Pamela Fuselli, who is the president and CEO of Parachute, Canada's national charity dedicated to injury prevention. Pamela was the executive director at Safe Kids Canada, and during her tenure was one of the 4 leaders who successfully led a process of national consultation and visioning, resulting in the formation of Parachute, which was really an amalgamation of 4 different organizations into one, that this summer is celebrating its 10th anniversary. And Pamela is the very capable leader of that organization. Pamela, we just spent the last couple of minutes talking about a bunch of different preventable injuries and how they can be prevented. And I was surprised that it was falling, car, motor vehicle accidents, and poisonings that were your top 3. And we didn't really talk a lot about falls, other than banisters and things like that you mentioned. And so maybe we come back to that. But I'm wondering, what are the new challenges that have emerged? What are the new things that you need to be worried about, or that we need to be worried about?
Yeah, we've had some real key successes in injury prevention. You think about seat belts and safer car designs and ABS brakes and things like that. But there are always new things that are facing us, and you think about distracted driving. 20 years ago that wasn't an issue, but now we see it in a lot of cases surpassing drinking and driving, impaired driving. So
seriously,
we always
playing with your phone has more of an impact than drinking and driving.
Yes. When you look at the stats from, like, say, the OPP, the Ontario Provincial Police, it in the last number of years has come in as higher than impaired driving as a cause of crashes.
That's interesting.
But there's new things always. So we're seeing, the move to SUVs and larger, they're larger and heavier vehicles. Before, when there was, there's still a lot of cars on the road, but when you think about those high grills of SUVs and pickup trucks and things like that, where they hit people, when they do hit people, is now changed from their lower extremities like legs into the torso of the body, and for kids it's their torso and head, which when you're talking about serious injuries, those are really serious, versus a broken leg. So though that's one of the issues. We've seen things like laundry pods. Those are still an issue with kids. And
Laundry pods. Why laundry pods?
Well, they are very colorful. And if you've seen any of them, and kids are attracted to them. They think they're candy. And if you've been on TikTok lately, there is a huge trend of taking them out of the containers that they come in, that the manufacturers have produced, and used locking devices on the top to try to keep kids out of these products. So another child resistant kind of lid. People are taking them out and putting them into glass organizing, like jars and plastic containers that are pretty and they look lovely on their counters, but it opens their children up to accessing these products more easily. So the other thing that over the last, I guess, year or so, we've heard from our pediatricians in emergency departments around an increase, not a huge increase, but an increase in button battery injuries. So these are those little wee flat round batteries that come in so many products these days. So even greeting cards that have music and audio for them come with these button batteries. You've got fobs, you've got remote controls, and they can cause really serious injuries if they're swallowed by children. They start to break down. The acid from the battery, eats through the lining of their stomachs and their throats and that. So we've seen they're not high in numbers, but they're serious injuries that can be fatal. And then, as we were talking, the cannabis legalization and that issue of legal and illegal products is something that we are dealing with more these days in terms of new challenges.
I seem to know a lot of people that have had problems with ladders or concussion, or both, ladders that cause concussion falling off of them. Is there, and I guess that's just head injuries, but is there something special you can do for concussion?
Yeah, concussion is a huge issue, and we've done a lot of work around youth and concussion, and specifically concussion from sporting activities. And when you look at the pattern of concussion, when the sort of older youth, so the 7, 8, 9 up to early 20s, that's when you see a real peak in sport related concussion. But really, no matter how you get the concussion, the treatment is the same. So whether you fall off the ladder, I know a person who walked into the cabinet door in their kitchen and was off work for a year with concussion related management issues. No matter how you get the concussion, how you treat it is really important for preventing further injury. So there's ways to prevent concussions, especially in sporting, in sports, like rules of the game, gear that they wear, how they identify the identification of a concussion. The fast identification is so important, and having somebody who knows what they're doing in terms of a healthcare provider, a physician, in diagnosing a concussion can really mean the difference between a long recovery and a short recovery. And the knowledge has changed over the years. We don't recommend, going into a dark room or waking people up every hour. We're finding that that a short period of rest and then getting back into normal everyday activities is actually the better recovery for concussion. So we're quite concerned about youth and concussion, but we're also starting to see some emerging data and evidence around seniors' falls and concussion. So and that presents a bit of complexity too when you think about older adults and some of the other cognitive issues they may have, like dementia and Alzheimer's. It's sometimes hard to tease out what the symptoms are for a concussion versus, what is their normal cognitive abilities. And so even just recognizing that a senior or an older adult who has fallen could have a concussion, just that recognition has been something that's gotten more attention in the past few years.
That's interesting. I had a pitch from a company that had a monitor that they put on beds that could predict better and prevent better falls from seniors in hospital beds and or in old age homes and things like that. And so falling out of the bed, I was surprised at, ends up being a big issue.
Yeah. And so looking at the environment, the type of bed they're in, but also really, making sure that, exercise balance plays a huge role in fall prevention. And so that idea of being active through your whole life, it's easier to maintain that activity level throughout your life than, trying to get physically more active in your older years. So, it's one of these kind of across the lifespan issues that is really important, that you don't kind of think about fall prevention in older adults when they're younger, but it is a major factor. Footwear is for fall prevention is key. Even just the fear of falling will keep people in their house and isolated. So there's a multitude of issues that we need to deal with around sort of the fall prevention piece. But going back to your question about, concussion, it's a topic that's gotten a lot of attention, especially through the sport angle. And we're really interested in making sure that anyone who has a concussion knows how to treat it, where to get help, where to get treatment, and so to be able to recover that much more quickly in a normal period of time.
I think the point you made about knowing when to remove yourself from play and not go back in. The way it was explained to me once by a scientist is that a concussion and a repeated concussion has a linear impact, as you would sort of negative impact as you'd expect, but a concussion on top of another concussion has a logarithmic exponential negative impact. And so therefore, if you got a concussion, don't go out. And this person said, that the 3 knockouts for a technical knockout was the stupidest thing. Once you're knocked out once, the last thing you should do is get back up again and go back at it. And people that have been knocked out 3 times are really, truly, technically, something's wrong because it's had an exponential impact. Anyway, statistics and facts are one thing, but real stories, personal experiences are a whole nother thing. Can you share with us, how injuries and deaths of an avoidable, preventable injury have impacted people's lives and families and things like that?
Yeah, it's really what drives me personally. And our organization as a whole is the results that we see when families are able to share with us their experience of a loss of a loved one or an injury that has significantly altered their life. And so a couple of examples, just going back to your question around concussion. We worked a lot in Ontario on Rowan's Law that was started from the death, unfortunately, of Rowan Stringer, who was a grade 12 student in the Ottawa area. And she passed away following a concussion at a rugby match. And it showed the inquest showed that she had died from second impact syndrome, which she had likely suffered 2 previous concussions in 2 games in the week before the match where she suffered her fatal injury and concussion. And it certainly has sparked some real positive changes, but nothing is worth the loss of a young person or anyone to be able to, we should be doing the right thing regardless of these personal stories. But, her family has suffered, her parents and her sibling. She's not graduated. She's not gotten married. She's not there for birthdays. It just tears families apart in grief, and wondering if they could have done something or what they should have done. Another example is a young man, Josh Field. He was 17 when he died from a crash. He reached for his cell phone to give to his girlfriend, not to use the cell phone, overcorrected and ended up hitting a tree and crashing. And both of these examples demonstrate that there's the human cost, which is so important. They're not having children. They're not, contributing even to society. Like, I mean, if you look at even the dollars and cents kind of thing, they're not there to contribute to, having a job, paid work, volunteering. And in the report that we did last year, in that 1 year from all ages, there was collectively over 330,000 years of life lost just from the injuries, the deaths that happened in that 1 year. So, personally, I've heard stories of wives being killed, and their husbands, in one family, the husband was killed by a motor vehicle crash. And it ended up, really physically and mentally impacting his wife, to the point where she actually passed away from what she felt was predicated on the loss of her husband. There isn't direct evidence, but you look at the pain and suffering of these families and the loss to community and society as a whole when especially those under 44 year olds are lost to something that is preventable. And I think that's what gets my team really committed to the work that we do, is we know we can prevent these deaths and serious injuries. If we had a cure for a disease,
we do something.
We would do something. It would have been implemented long ago. But on average, when we think about, like the implementation of seatbelts, it takes about 20, 25 years to see something that's prevention, that upstream solution that stops these things from happening to begin with, to be fully implemented. So when you think about installation of seatbelts in vehicles, that was in the late 1950s. And in Canada, the mandatory use of them was in 1976. So there's 26 years. And we know that it wasn't until well into the late 80s, early 90s that the majority of people wear seatbelts. I mean, we are at a high level of compliance now in the 92%-ish range of people that wear seatbelts. But you think they were installed in vehicles in the 1950s. We knew they worked in the 1950s. Why does it take so long to implement solutions that we know are effective?
Pamela, if people want to check out your organization, maybe get involved, donate some money, do something, is there a website that they should go to?
Yeah, we have a website, parachute.ca. We also have a number of channels accounts on social media. So we're on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, Parachute Canada are most of our tags. So if you want to follow us, visit our website. There's lots of great information and you can donate there.
We're chatting tonight about preventable injuries. We're going to take a break and get back in 2 minutes with Pamela Fuselli, the president and CEO of Parachute Canada. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. We're chatting tonight with Pamela Fuselli. He is the president and CEO, and sounds really like one of the co-founders, really, because you were one of the people that created the organization, Preventable Injury Organization. That's an amalgamation of 4 different previous organizations called Parachute Canada that I hadn't heard about, and I read about and was interested and intrigued and wanted to reach out to Pamela to have her explain the organization to us. Pamela, let me, turn the tables on you for a minute. There was a famous Canadian Toronto psychologist who had, I can't remember, 10 things about life or something like this. And one of them was, don't stop kids when they're skateboarding. And the point that he was making is sometimes we stop kids, teenagers from doing things that they want to do that are exciting. And we do that maybe by putting up blockages or doing things. And then they end up doing even more risky things to get around it. And so therefore we'd be better off allowing kids to, do tricks on their bicycles or play with their skateboards. Because when you put up barriers, they start doing the skateboard tricks on top of the barriers and getting even more hurt. What do you think of that argument that, when kids are playing with skateboards, we shouldn't be stopping them when what you're trying to do is stop a lot of injuries?
Yeah. And I think there's a difference between, and we talk about risks and hazards. So things that are risky vary depending on what age you are. So when you're 2, going out on the edge walk on the CN Tower is really a hazard, not a risk. So we have to assess at what point these kind of activities are risky, or if they're a hazard. So, and sometimes it's hard in some cases, it's very easy, black and white, if there's a broken glass in a playground or needles, discarded needles or broken equipment, that's really easy to identify as a hazard. That has no benefit to development or skill, developing your physical skills. So we absolutely want kids to be able to, and adults as well, to be able to, push their limits, to assess risk in positive ways that they can have fun. But the goal is to be able to come back the next day and do it. So, it depends on the particular, barrier that's being put up. But I absolutely would agree that we need to allow kids and individuals, even no matter what their age, to kind of push their boundaries, to go that extra little step that, gives them that thrill and to be able to develop themselves. They can feel proud of themselves that when they've achieved something that they couldn't have done or didn't do the last time that they, were engaged in that activity. So there are things that are hazards, and those are the things that we want to intervene about. So driving drunk, driving high, driving distracted. We know those are hazards. Those aren't risks. So I do agree that, that we need to focus on the things that are important, on the things that are actually causing serious injuries and death. And I can tell you, skateboarding, and doing tricks and things like that is not high on at least from the data, is not high on the causes of fatal and serious injuries. So, I think that's where we have to kind of, balance out that risk and, their ability to live a life to the fullest.
Pamela, thank you so much for joining us tonight and sharing with us your own personal story in injury prevention and also the story of Parachute and what you're trying to achieve. I really appreciate it. You can reach Pamela and or find out about what Parachute is all about at parachute.ca, and or, as she mentioned, on social media at Parachute Canada. Pamela Fuselli, President and CEO of Parachute Canada, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Brian. It was a pleasure.
That's our show for tonight, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Don't go out and get injured. Think about what you're doing. My mom always used to say, grab the railing. It just takes a little bit more effort to grab the railing. And you know what? I got to tell you that my father's, I'm not sure if it was the best advice, but it was pretty good advice. And it's something that I quote often when I'm talking to my kids and other people. And I use it. Like I use it when people are drinking. I use it when people are playing games. My father used to say, always leave the party while you're still having fun. And I thought that was really good. So what that says is, and maybe my mom said, nothing good happens after 1 a.m. or something like that. But it's that, you don't take it to the extreme, because it's at the extreme of partying, of drinking, of skiing, that one last run. I think there's some statistic that most people get hurt skiing during their last run. That's probably by definition is their last run when they got hurt, but the last run of the day. And or other things in life that you do that you stopped having fun and it starts to get bad, and that's when things happen. So this weekend, let's remember that adage. If we could, always leave the party while you're still having fun. And let's think about what Pamela has told us about falls, about motor vehicle accidents, and about poisoning, which is surprising. And if you invite me over to your house, don't have those laundry pods in clear glasses like Pamela warned us about. It's not Martha Stewart. It's something that we can prevent an injury. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Good night. Pamela, really appreciate it.